Welcome to Practical Shamanism. I'm Katie Weatherup. I'm a former engineer with 20 years of experience working as a shamanic practitioner, and I hope to help you to connect to your personal power and magic and to support you in living a really good life that just keeps getting better. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to share with you about my approach to sharing information and content, because I think if you were listening to my spoken words, whether in a podcast or in a class, from a standpoint of wondering what's the point. So we have this society where we all go to school and go through these experiences, and the education model has a really specific way of sharing information. It's very linear. The deliverables about what quizzes you're expected to pass and what you're supposed to be able to regurgitate afterward is very clear. Often there are PowerPoint slides that have exactly the same information as what's being spoken, in case you're a visual learner. And that's really cool. You know, I've had a lot of education. I got my engineering degree, so I'm extremely familiar with the model of learning in that way. And at the same time, the way that I teach and the way that I share information and the way I offer what I'm offering has a very different flavor. And if you're trying to make sense of it in that linear PowerPoint, what's the point, getting there in a linear fashion, me having a clear outline that I follow along on, you could miss out on some rich things that I'm offering and or be very frustrated and annoyed. And so when you come to something that I'm sharing, or I would argue many people who are sharing deeper spiritual wisdom, personal growth information, transformational materials, that there's a tendency to sort of talk in circles and go on tangents and have things weave back together. And this isn't about teaching you a skill or a body of knowledge or the ability to understand how to do static analysis so bridges won't fall down, because everyone really needs to be on the same page as that. This is about your growth and transformation as a person. And so if you're listening, the idea isn't that you accept everything I say or agree with everything I say. It's using your discernment to take what is valuable from you from the larger offering, teasing out the one thing. One of the ways that you might be able to connect with this is if we were talking about someone that we really admire. We could talk about Brené Brown. We could talk about the Dalai Lama. We could talk about Gandhi. You know, there are all these amazing, inspired leaders and people who are just doing magnificent things. Personally, I'm totally enamored of this couple, Kara and Nate, who are just traveling the world, making these amazing videos on YouTube that tell their story in a really engaging way. And what you might appreciate about any one of these people could be their kindness or their humility or how articulate they were or how smart they were or how kind they were. For me, one of the qualities that I see in all of those people is the magnificence of the ripple of their brilliance having a meaningful impact on the world. You know, when you hear accounts of the Dalai Lama, he can vibrationally change the experience that everyone is having among thousands and thousands of people by holding an energetic vibration that is so pure and clear and amazing. And I doubt that I will ever aspire to anything close to that. But as someone who understands the principles of vibration and the invitation to wake up potential inside of people, it's an amazing quality. And so with these kind of offerings, there's a wide range of what people can take away. You know, what someone quotes from Brené Brown or remembers from a particularly evocative poem or history lesson is going to be different from person to person. And so when I speak, I'm connecting to my team of guides. And so there's a process of sharing wisdom that they've gathered together to work with me to present, to offer. And the way my guides like to work is to share more than can ever be taken in one sitting necessarily, but plant a bunch of different seeds. And so there may be concepts that are just brushed over lightly, but if it's the right thing for you, it'll feel like throwing a ball for a retriever dog. I think of the part of my brain that really finds something that resonates, like the dog chasing the stick brain, focus, focus, this is the thing. And for example, my very first shamanism class, I started off with Reiki, and it was incredible revelation, because so much of who I am is about my energetic sensitivity, and finally getting some tools to work with that, and the archetype of the healer that had been thwarted in the sense of only finding an outlet and giving non-consensual coaching, telling people how to live their lives without them having asked me for that. And suddenly there was this flow where I could be received. I found volunteer opportunities where people really wanted to receive the work, and I was learning about my own energetic sensitivity. And at that time I was an engineer, so I had the privilege of having a really good budget to be able to take a bunch of classes. And one of the classes I took was Hank Wesselman's class through the Learning Annex in San Diego on shamanism. And he mentioned soul retrieval so briefly. It was just an aside in passing. And at that time, I was in my 20s and I was painfully shy. So voluntarily walking up to a man who I perceived as an authority figure and asking him for information on how to acquire my own soul retrieval was terrifying, but the longing was so much bigger. So I went up very shyly at the very end of class and asked. And his wife, Jill, is a magnificent soul retrieval practitioner, and I went to her. I actually got to have my soul retrieval with my mother, which was magical and healing and really rich in its own right. And the clarity after that experience came in so strongly, where I knew that if I only got to do one thing for people, it would be this soul retrieval work. I'd found my calling. I'd found the thing that I was most lit up about after having studied dozens of modalities and dozens of techniques quite joyfully. I love all the different approaches, but this one was really the one that was resonant. And so part of what is offered in what I speak is that there'll be that feeling of something that lights up for you that may not really be super woven in or feel all that germane to the main topic, but it's there for someone. And I've had over 20 years of teaching the feedback over and over again from people who weren't even in the room, who got the recording afterwards and said, I felt like you were talking specifically to me. And that's sort of the magic of having a team of guides that can transcend space and time in a way, is I, as the person delivering and speaking the content, don't know where it will go or where it will be heard or what the ripple will be, but I believe that this amazing team of guides has a good sense of what's being offered and to whom, in ripples that go out very far from the original moment. So you might find this years after I've recorded it, and it might have the seed that was put there just for you. And the other piece of it is that there's a vibrational transmission. And so in speaking words that correspond to deep energy and connection to universal principles and transmissions, it gives you a chance to be available to that in a certain way. So your conscious mind is engaged with the concept of soul purpose or past lives or healing trauma or the ability to talk to the trees or get healing from nature or whatever it is, but bringing your conscious focus to that in a transmission that the words are pointing to something rather than being the thing. One of the things that I think we lose a lot in our society is we treat the words as if they are the thing. The words are an end in and of themselves. The words are the thing. And I would offer that I love words. I have a huge vocabulary. I adore them. I am caught up in the exquisiteness of a turn of phrase. So like Elizabeth Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love, has this beautiful book, Big Magic. And I was just in awe of the eloquence and the beauty and the precision of her using words. She's far more masterful than I will ever be. And yet the words point to something deeper. They point to the energetics. They point to all the things that can never really be spoken into. And so in using the words as a compass and as a map, the map isn't the territory, but the map allows you to engage effectively and in a meaningful way and find your way in a territory. And in addition, there's this vibrational transmission. So I think if you spend time with anyone who's teaching this kind of content, whether they're teaching Tantra or they're teaching meditation or they're, teaching all these various amazing modalities, and they are someone who is highly connected to spirit while doing it, they have a sense that sometimes their job is to just keep talking so the noisy mind has a place to be engaged while the spirit and the deeper essence can receive something precious and rare and amazing. Because when I was teaching in person a lot of classes, half the healing wasn't the teaching people to do shamanic journey and how to heal past lives and how to work with their inner child. I believe in that content and I think it was all really powerful. And at the same time, the fact that they were coming into sacred space for 2 hours and not opening up their cell phones and not worrying about their lives. They weren't worrying about the past or concerned with the future. They were just ideally, if I was on my game enough, engaged enough in the experience to be really present. And so in that experience, their conscious mind could literally get out of their way enough for their spirit and their soul to have a healing and transforming experience. And so when you're listening to anything that I offer, consider that ideally it's engaging for your mind. I don't think it'll be much fun to listen. And there are lots of brilliant people offering brilliant transmissions. So if it's not fun to listen to me, I think that you could find someone who could offer something amazing that you would find it fun to listen to. But just consider with this kind of content that is driven by a connection to source, however you language that. Some people say God, some people say spirit, some people, just think of the magnificence of the universe. I would argue that the human mind is magnificent and designed in incredible ways to drive cars and be in linear time and keep babies alive and experience wonder and gratitude and love and, just an incredible richness. But it's not equipped, I believe, in its fundamental nature to understand the nature of the universe, to understand the unseen world. I believe in order to be capable of driving a car, we lose our capacity to feel in a visceral way our oneness with all that is. Or it's a pretty cool thing to dial in, if you do dial that in, to be holding both at the same time. There's no reason you can't be effective in your life and very, very connected to all that is, but it's a little bit of a trick. And again, I just think just like certain computers can't run certain programs, the human mind just doesn't have that capacity. And so the language can only imperfectly point to that experience of the unseen world. We are experiential beings, and in a society that has really prioritized things that we can conceptualize rationally and put into language, and language is super limited. It very much limits the richness of a felt experience. And so what do we do about that? Well, the way that our ancestors worked it out was a lot of storytelling. They sat around the fire and they told about their victories and their challenges. And there were lessons in there, but when they taught people how not to annoy snakes and get bit by them, they told their hero's journey stories. They told I messed it up and it was so scary. They told this almost happened. They didn't sit children in a perfect line and walk through here's how to not get bit by a snake in a linear fashion. It was woven into the storytelling, all the dangers you need to be aware of, all the opportunities. The collective knowledge was shared in narrative and story and reminders when you were out and about. Hey, remember to make noise so the snakes can hear you. I grew up on a farm in Northern California, so training to avoid snakes was a relevant part of my childhood. I don't know that I ever saw any more than a few, but when we were tromping in the pasture with the goats, we were taught to make noise and therefore give the snakes the opportunity to get out of our way. And so with all of this different way of sharing content, a part of it that's storytelling, a part of it that just plants random little seeds that'll be the right thing for someone, that is layered with concepts that are ideally very accessible to someone who's brand new to the path, but still has the richness to give new possibilities and ideas to the very experienced seeker, somebody who's gone very, very deep into exploring and engaging with this part of themselves. Something that's designed to keep your conscious mind occupied and engaged, but also real-time receptive to energy transmissions and shifts, things that ideally get around the sort of protections that we have to new ideas. We have these protections like cognitive dissonance, where we can literally rationalize completely irrational things without even realizing it, because the brain has to work really hard when it rewires itself, when it changes its view of reality. And for early humans for whom calories were short, it was hard to have enough food, it was a lot of calories that went into remapping the brain to update reality. So you didn't do that historically unless you needed a better model. If it would create a better survival model, if it would help you procreate, if it would help keep your children alive, then updating your worldview with new information was really worthwhile. But if the new information didn't help you in some way, probably wasn't the best use of calories and energy if those things were very, very limited, which they were for most of humanity. And in the modern era, we have this magnificent opportunity for the majority of the world population that isn't going hungry to be able not to be limited in how we have this neuroplasticity that lets our brain update and adapt and clean up maladaptive strategies that we came up with in childhood and expand our view of the world and learn about places that are far away. There's an amazing opportunity, and we're not limited with the lack of energy. We're not putting our survival at risk by having our head in the clouds, unless we're, walking into the street or not paying enough attention while we drive. But we don't need to save our calories for survival. We can have this amazing activation of mental capacity and flexible thinking and all of these kind of things. But it's useful to know we're working a little bit against some of our default settings as humans. And the default settings were really good for survival, but they were designed to help us not die. And so in what I'm offering, I hope to give you new possibilities. I hope to give you new roadmaps. I hope to give you ideas for transforming in your life in ways that will let you thrive so much more deeply. But the way that that information is most appropriately shared isn't particularly the linear teaching, high school algebra kind of approach where each step built on the next. It's the way of moving the energy and creating opportunities and letting your mind relax and keeping you engaged in the present moment so things can shift and change. And everything I speak ties to this amazing group of helping spirits that are available to support you in the transformations that are most relevant for you. They're not going to work non-consensually. If you're like, don't mess with my energy, free choice is sacred, they'll respect that. But if you have a healing concept where you're like, wow, I really want more of that, that can be transmitted to you. The possibility can be woken up. So when I seek people to learn from, when I look for teachers, I don't look for how smart they are or how much education they have. That's relevant, but it's not my first thing. I look at whether they have embodied something that I feel would deeply serve me to embody. So are they deeply emotionally intelligent? Are they deeply intuitive? Are they living a really well-balanced life? I struggle with getting enough exercise, and so somebody who really joyfully moves their body is someone I'm going to pay attention to as a potential teacher, because they have a mastery of something that would serve me really, really well to master. And one of the things you may have come across is this concept of the 100th monkey. And you can Google it, but the short version is that with new food sources, the monkeys came up with a way of washing their food before they ate it so it didn't get sandy when people were dropping, food for monkeys on the beach. And about the time the 100th monkey showed all the other monkeys on its island how to do that, spontaneously the monkeys on all the nearby islands started doing exactly the same thing. And so there's this mastery that goes into the collective that isn't just the monkey see, monkey do. Monkey see, monkey do is one of the ways that we learn things, but there's also the possibility is in the collective of something that would be supportive, and that gets accessed. And so simultaneously all the monkeys, just had this new behavior that emerged overnight when it reached enough monkeys engaging in an advantageous way doing that. And that's something that makes a lot of us metaphysical types really optimistic, because as we meditate on loving kindness and we see new possibilities and there are new innovations, and humans find better ways of playing nice with each other, and people heal their sexual trauma, and we have more socially just ways of participating with each other, we can all collectively tap into it. There's this wisdom and knowledge. And so I've done a lot of interpersonal work. From the time I was 18, 19, I was in some form of therapy or facilitated inquiry on a very regular basis. First of all, I really needed it. I wasn't happy with the results. My social skills were wildly underdeveloped. I was bad at social cues. And I really had this knowing that things could be better and more and different, and I could have more joy in my life. I was a little stress ball of perfectionism and type A and alienating people, like working so hard and trying to be perfect and good and actually being rather obnoxious to people. And so I did a ton of work with the psychological, with emotional development, with spiritual development, with connection to my guides. And some of it took me in not very elegant, fast directions, and some of it was really elegant. But I've honed everything I've learned and lived and organized it so ideally anyone I share it with has faster access. They can get where I went faster and with a lot less effort, because I can point them to the right map and I can share an energetic transmission. So all the work I did to clean up trying to be right instead of being in curiosity about hearing someone, or trying to get someone to hear me rather than being available to hear them, and all the havoc that created, it's something that someone who works with me, even if they just listen to the words I say, might be able to access so much faster because of what I've embodied. And so when you're seeking transformations, it's very powerful to look around for who's embodying the thing that I want to be, and they'll be the people you admire. One of the books I really love is Debbie Ford's The Dark Side of Light Chasers, and she talks about shadow work, the parts we disown and disenfranchise and make bad and wrong. And she also talks about our light shadow. There's an incredibly quoted Marianne Williamson quote about putting aside our light. And whenever you have this resonance to someone, whenever you admire or appreciate them, they may well be actualizing a potential that lives inside of you in a really big way. And you might not need to take it to the world stage level. I don't aspire to take my work to the world stage level. I believe that it's more nuanced than what people are looking for in the mainstream. It's not really meme-based. It's got a lot of complicated layers in a society that is used to receiving content in a linear way. So anyone who's listening and receiving value is having that mental flexibility to receive something in a different, multi-layered way. And so when you look at actualizing potential, please don't fall into the trap of thinking that it only counts if it's measurable, if you've written a best-selling book or you have expressed it in some really big way. You can still really develop your amazing gifts and potentials another 10% and reap all the benefits. I feel like, there's a really great class I took on the science of well-being. It was a Yale course that was extremely popular. I believe the instructor was Lori Santo. I may be saying her name wrong. She has a podcast called The Happiness Lab. But in that course, she really breaks down what brings people happiness. And often it isn't the things that we think. And what's powerful about that is what I would say would bring us happiness and fulfillment and feeling aligned with our soul purpose and being effective at earning a living in a really graceful way. And all of these things isn't necessarily fame and fortune. And what represents powerful impact in the world isn't necessarily something that is measurable by status and collective human recognition. Again, with those vibrational transmissions and those ripples, if there's good in your life for the people around you, like that's one of the measures. Like, are you healthy enough that you can take care of yourself? Because that's super important first. And then from there, have enough left over at the end of the day that there's good for other beings in your life, whether that's the trees or the whales or your children or some segment of humanity with a cause that you're passionate about, or you're just really kind and present with service people. Whatever it looks like, are there ripples of good that are coming from your life? And so in actualizing these amazing potentials that live inside of you, you'll find them a lot faster if you find vibrational maps, and content like this is going to offer vibrational maps. There's wisdom within you that has nothing to do with your linear thinking mind that is magnificent in its own right and that can gather really quality models and information that will serve you very well while you're occupied being entertained by whatever story I'm telling and whatever words. And it is my intent and the intent of the helping spirits that I work with to have that be an offer, to have that be an outcome. So if you're still listening, thank you so much for saying yes and for deciding to spend your time with me. And I hope that this deeply and profoundly supports you. Thank you so much for joining me. To learn more about me and my work, please visit my website at handsoverheart.com. There you can join my mailing list for access to free bonus content in the members-only area. If you've enjoyed this, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. It would help me out a lot. Also, a special thank you to my patrons for your support. You offer me the time freedom to work on passion projects like this one. If you'd like to receive personal shamanic support from me and my team of guides, please consider joining my Patreon community. You'll find the link below. And again, thank you so much for listening. This is Katie Weatherup, wishing you wholeness and happiness.